Here is what all of the president's Republican defenders in Washington had to say today. Did I say all? I meant both.
The president was vindicated. Comey confirmed that the president was never under investigation. 3 times he told the president that. And I think it's understandable to me why the president would be a little bit put out with Comey and say to Comey, good grief, if you're telling me I'm not under investigation, why don't you tell the American people? Because this cloud of an investigation is really damaging. And I think that's sort of an honest appraisal and an honest reaction by the president.
I think what happened the last 24, 48 hours cleared a lot of things up and confirmed what President Trump's been saying all along, that he wasn't under investigation. And I think when this, after what we saw, it looks good for the president and frankly not so good for former FBI Director James Comey.
That's it. That's all the defenders. Now, don't confuse defending the president with quibbling about James Comey and other things. A few other Republicans, like Susan Collins, tried to help the president with excuses about how ignorant he is. But even Susan Collins said this.
It is totally wrong. I'll go beyond inappropriate. It is wrong for the President of the United States to tell or imply to an FBI director that an investigation should not go forward.
A few other Republicans criticized James Comey, but they did not. They did not affirmatively defend the president. One Republican called James Comey the leaker-in-chief, but that Republican did not say that he did not believe James Comey. Even Rand Paul's defense of the president was based on believing James Comey, and so James Comey's credibility remained intact today in Washington. 100% intact. Joining us now, David K. Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and a Trump biographer who founded DCReport.org, a nonprofit news organization that covers the Trump administration. And also with us, Anna Marie Cox, senior political correspondent for MTV News and host of the podcast With Friends Like These. Anna Marie, James Comey's credibility was not the thing that Republicans went after today when they were trying in their small ways to help the president. But the striking thing was how few Republicans were trying in such small ways to help the president.
Yeah, the cloud is starting to stink a bit. It grows darker and gives off a noxious gas. I think it's starting to disturb some of the Republicans on Congress or in Congress. I also think that it's just what we're seeing here is a continuation of playing politics when the question is really a matter of the law. And that's the sort of weird kind of responses you're seeing on the Hill, is they're treating this as though it's a battle that should be won in the court of public opinion, and not like there's an actual legal case to be made, which they seem to have forgotten about when, as you point out, they confirm what Comey is saying. They stand for his credibility. Like all of those senators in that hearing laid it on pretty thick, actually, when they were complimenting Comey. So they seem to think that the game here is to kind of spin, but it's not spinning. There's a law against obstruction of justice, and James Comey laid out, as you pointed out before, as the people pointed out before, a very strong case for sort of the first part of that legal action. I'm happy with them pretending that that's not going on. I think that's not going to serve them well moving forward.
Yeah, and David, the president in his way seems to pretend that everything Anna just talked about, that there's actual legal forces in play here, that they aren't real, that he can just stand up there at the microphone today and say whatever he wants. You've studied him, you've spoken to him, you know him better than certainly any of us have could ever know him. You've seen his behavior in litigation before. What do we know about his litigation history that can tell us how he's handling this, and how much experience does he have in criminal litigation with him as the subject of a criminal investigation?
Well, you heard the speaker today suggest that Trump doesn't understand what's going on here. Trump beat 4 federal grand jury investigations in his youth. 4. And during the campaign, what did he continually harangue Hillary Clinton about? The meeting her husband had with the Attorney General, and kept saying that was pure evidence of corruption, that the mere existence of a one-on-one meeting between Loretta Lynch as Attorney General and Bill Clinton meant that Hillary Clinton should not be allowed to run for office. Donald Trump is all bluster and bluffing and threats. And you've already seen that his New York lawyer is not very good. He doesn't spell things correctly. He gets facts out of order. He has no sophistication to deal with this, which is not going to serve Trump well. There's one of the things I think is very important here. When you played Rand Paul, I don't think he listened carefully. My piece at DC Report today is about how Comey actually made it quite clear that only technically was the president not the subject of a grand jury, of a formal FBI counterintelligence case, because they haven't yet opened a file with his name on it. He even used the word technically.
Yes, and it was very, very clear that the president is the subject of an investigation now, and that investigation, of course, being obstruction of justice that Comey was testifying about yesterday. Bob Inglis, a former Republican member of the House of South Carolina, tweeted today to Speaker Ryan saying, "You know that you would be inquiring into impeachment if this were a D." And Anna Marie, there's no question about that.
That's right. Actually, I have to give a shout out to Bob Inglis. He's a great guy. He's also a conservative climate activist, believe it or not. So he's someone we should be paying attention to as an ally on a lot of different fronts. And he's definitely right about this. There's a level of hypocrisy here that is almost literally stomach turning. I was talking to a relative of mine today about this, and she was like, "Why are we wasting our time on this?" And I was like, Benghazi? Did we forget about all those investigations? No, it's disgusting, and we need to just let. This is what I keep telling myself. The wheels of justice are turning. These investigations are happening. This is not going to be a matter, as I said, of a public opinion. This is going to be a matter of law. And whether or not Paul Ryan likes it, that's going to be proceeding. They can spin, they can dance, but as someone put it to me earlier this week, the duck of the FBI may be floating on the surface, but it's paddling fast underneath, and it will be getting somewhere.
We're going to have to take a break here. David K. Johnston, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Anna Marie, we're going to need you a little bit later. Coming up, and
stuff continues to happen. I mean, even, as of tonight, we've got this question as to whether or not James Comey's friend, this Columbia Law School professor, is going to hand over that memo. We've got the Judiciary Committee on the Senate side apparently gearing up to really pursue this obstruction of justice inquiry. Dianne Feinstein sending a list of witnesses she wants to talk to. And, I mean, all of this stuff could potentially evolve, I think, over the weekend, as well as into that, heading toward that Sessions testimony Tuesday morning.
Not to mention the 100% guarantee from the president that he will testify under oath about his what do you he said 100%, Rachel, come on.
So yeah, it was funny, the question to him was kind of garbled. It was just one of those things that like kind of the nouns got swapped around or whatever, and then the president in his answer that was also kind of garbled, and everything doesn't always come out right. Life is lived live and things don't always come out as if they're scripted. I couldn't help looking at the transcript of that though today, couldn't help wondering if they will use the garbled nature of the question and the president's gobbledygook language in his answer to try to get around the fact that he basically affirmatively said he would do it.
They'll find a way if they can. Rachel, you have earned your weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Thanks, Lawrence.
Rest.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, the president made his 100% guarantee today, 100% promise to his voters, to the country. He will absolutely testify under oath. So, what do you think the chances are of him ever actually testifying under oath?
Would you be willing to speak under oath to give your version of
100%.
100%? Right. Well, you can really take that to the bank, can't you?
There cannot be a criminal defense lawyer in America that would have recommended that their client make that kind of a pledge right there.
My sense is there's no grown-up in the White House that can stare at him, look him in the eye, and tell him when he's screwing up.
James Comey confirmed a lot of what I said. and some of the things that he said just weren't true.
Right now, we have to take his word versus Comey's word.
I hardly know the man. I'm not going to say, I want you to pledge allegiance.
Okay, wait, let's do a pledge.
Who would do that?
Can I have a pledge? A swearing. Raise your right hand.
Who would ask a man to pledge allegiance?
You can't expect people to respect the office of president any more than the occupant of the job does.
This guy can't say anything, almost anything, without lying. He's devalued the presidency.
The president is uneducable. He cannot learn. He apparently stopped learning as soon as his father stopped teaching him the real estate business. Someone in the White House might have tried to teach the president the good news and the bad news about having a special prosecutor appointed to investigate his connections to Russia and to investigate possible obstruction of justice by the Trump administration and, of course, by the president himself. The bad news is a special prosecutor is investigating you. The good news is every question that anyone asks from that point forward about the widening scandal that required the appointment of a special prosecutor can be answered simply by saying, I can't comment on anything related in any way to an ongoing investigation. Next question. A president gets to do that with every question anyone asks once a special prosecutor has been appointed. And the news media has to accept that answer. They have always accepted that answer. I mean, they keep asking the questions, but they accept the answer, and then they move on to questions about your tax proposal or your health care bill. But because the president is uneducable, and because the major law firms in Washington refuse to defend him in his current predicament, and he is stuck with the most incompetent lawyer who has ever defended a president in trouble, today, the president said this.
Would you be willing to speak under oath to give your version of
100%.
There's the president making a public commitment to the country, to his voters, that no good lawyer would allow him to do. When the time comes that the president is asked to deliver testimony under oath about what he said alone in a room with James Comey, he will do everything he can to avoid giving that testimony under oath. He will break that 100% promise. He will claim executive privilege. He will fight it in court. And what we don't know is what he will do if he is ordered by the Supreme Court to give that testimony under oath. The president still might refuse to give that testimony. He might defy a Supreme Court order because the president is not a constitutionalist. The president is not a man of the law. The president is Donald Trump. The president does not know that the Supreme Court can give him orders, him personally, as the Supreme Court did. Donald Trump was paying no attention to that because it happened during that period of his life where he was concerned, according to previous testimony given to Howard Stern, with nothing other than how much sex he could have with how many women. He told Howard Stern that the risk of venereal disease during those years was, quote, my personal Vietnam. Vietnam, of course, being the war that he was avoiding during those years because of a note he obtained from a doctor saying that his feet were just no good for anything other than marching around golf courses for the rest of his life. And if President Trump defies a direct order by the Supreme Court, we will have arrived at a constitutional crisis that could only be resolved through the impeachment process that would then have to be initiated in a House of Representatives that is currently led by the most spineless speaker that has ever been confronted with an investigation of a president. The president had more to say today about James Comey's testimony yesterday.
I hope, this is the president speaking, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, those are his exact words. Is that correct?
Correct.
I didn't say that.
In fact, he asked specifically of loyalty in the context of asking me to stay.
There'd be nothing wrong if I did say it, according to everybody that I've read today, but I did not say that.
No president is known to have regularly recorded conversations in the White House since Richard Nixon was forced to resign his presidency because of the criminal conduct revealed on the tape recordings of his White House conversations. Recording White House conversations turned out to be the single worst idea any president ever had about how to run his White House. It is a uniquely painful issue in the history of the presidency. The secret tape recordings of President Nixon's conversations are an ugly scar on the presidency. Every president since Nixon has known that, except the uneducable president. And so President Trump thinks the notion of secretly recording his conversations in the White House is something he can publicly throw around. When James Comey's version of his conversations with the president first became public, the president tweeted, "James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press." James Comey testified yesterday that that very tweet from the president convinced him that he needed to make his conversations with the president fully public as soon as possible. It was one of the many impulsive Trump tweets that have caused more harm than the president is capable of anticipating because, you know, childish minds are at their very weakest when it comes to anticipating predictable results of their impulsive actions.
Do tapes exist of your conversations with him?
Well, I'll tell you about that maybe sometime in the very near future.
You seem to be hinting that there are recordings of those conversations.
I'm not hinting anything. I'll tell you about it over a very short period of time.
When is that?
Okay? Okay. Do you have a question here?
When will you tell us about the recordings?
Over a fairly short period of time.
Are there tapes, sir?
Oh, you're going to be very disappointed when you hear the answer.
No, Mr. President. A majority of Americans are very disappointed that the anti-democratic defects of the Electoral College gave the presidency to a man who won 3 million fewer votes than the woman who won the most votes, and that that president shows no comprehension or even awareness of America's ugly history of secretly recorded presidential conversations. This afternoon, the House Intelligence Committee revealed that it has sent 2 evidence requests. First, the committee wrote to former Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey to request any notes or memoranda in his possession memorializing discussions Comey had with President Trump. Second, the committee wrote a letter to White House counsel Don McGahn requesting that he inform the committee whether any White House recordings or memoranda of Comey's conversations with President Trump now exist or have in the past. That, of course, suggests the possibility that those recordings existed and have been destroyed. The committee is demanding an answer by June 23rd. That deadline implies that the committee will subpoena that same information if it is not provided voluntarily by the White House. It is a virtual certainty that the special prosecutor has already subpoenaed or will soon subpoena any White House recordings or memoranda of James Comey's conversations with the president. Those subpoenas will come as a surprise to no one in the White House except the man who says he spent the Nixon years in his own personal Vietnam. Joining us now are Nick Ackerman, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He also served as an Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor, is now a partner at Dorsey & Whitney. Also with us, Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times and an MSNBC political analyst, and David Frum, Senior Editor for The Atlantic. Nick Ackerman, the future of the tapes, let's pretend for a moment that they exist. They will be subpoenaed.
I have no doubt that they will be subpoenaed. They absolutely should be. In fact, I'd be surprised if Mr. Mueller hasn't done that already.
And if this president tries to fight it in court, we have a case law here that indicates he will lose.
U.S. v. Nixon, right on the money, couldn't be more on point.
Right.
Gone. End of case.
But he can try to chase the case to an appellate level, possibly, but there will come a day when there would be, if he tries to fight this in court, where there will be a judicial order ordering the president to turn this over. And my point here is, this president is unpredictable in that moment. We have a president who we don't know what he will do in the face of an order.
Well, considering all he's done already in obstructing the investigation of the FBI, I wouldn't put it past him if he just took those tapes and burned them or put a magnet to them. I mean, he is the type of person who would do that in a second without any thought about the consequences or the fact that he's committing a serious federal felony. He's already done that. I mean, it'd just be a continuation of what he's already been doing to this point.
David, from my betting is on the side that there are no tapes,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I placed that bet is that President Trump is now saying that James Comey is lying about our conversation. If he knew there were tapes, I'm not sure he would be making those claims because the tapes surely would not back him up.
Right. I want to make first a mathematical aside. I mean, you have the number 100% on the screen. I just want to point out that when President Trump went to the CIA and gave that notorious speech about his big popular vote win, he told the CIA he backed them 1,000%. So there are a lot of percents. 100 isn't all of them. Maybe 1,000 isn't all of them. There are a lot more percents than you're prepared to allow for. And so if he's only giving you 100 of them, that may just be a very small down payment.
Right.
We have to, when we think about taping, remember, I mean, we are living the iPhone era, so the tape is a metaphor for a recording. As you say, it seems incredibly unlikely that there is a recording. This conversation with Comey took place not in the West Wing, but in the main White House. So either somebody had an iPhone on the table or in a pocket and used a recording device. It's hard to imagine the president himself being able to do that. Or else somebody has worked with the permanent White House staff to install microphones or listening devices in the woodwork of the historic executive mansion. That also doesn't seem very likely.
Peter Baker, shouting broke out today about the tapes when the president gave the non-answer to a very simple yes or no question that he knows the answer to. Can we expect this to be the question that the White House press corps will continue to be aiming in that direction as long as it remains unanswered?
Well, it's hard to imagine us not asking the question again and again. And he said very soon. So you can imagine the next time he takes questions, if he hasn't actually revealed anything at that point, to be asked, well, it's been pretty soon, sir. When are you going to let us know? Of course, in the past, he has said, you know, he was going to reveal things or do things in the near future that ended up not ever happening. It wouldn't be the first time that would happen. But this has greater consequence. And you're right. It does seem like a simple yes or no question. If you didn't have tapes, then the answer today, of course, is no. If you do have tapes, maybe you decide, look, I'll tell you something in the near future because they want to do something with those tapes. They want to negotiate with the special counsel. They want to review them. They want to transcribe them. They want to whatever. So, you know, I tend to agree with you. There's probably not likely to be tapes. It struck me when he first mentioned this, he was sort of trolling Jim Comey as kind of, you know, you don't know. But we don't know, and that's a position he kind of likes keeping people in for the moment.
Peter, any hint from anyone working at the White House about what the president is actually thinking about this tapes game that he's playing, or is the White House staff completely in the dark about whatever it is he's thinking?
I think most of them are as confused as we are. You know, we asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday, the White House Deputy Press Secretary, about this, and she says, sure, I'll go look under the couches for them. I think that they don't know for sure themselves. And there is a history of Donald Trump as a businessman being said, anyway, to record conversations that he made along the time. So nobody can be 100% sure. As you say, there's a lot of reasons to think it seems unlikely. As David was saying, you know, the various permutations of how this would come about seem pretty far-fetched. But then a lot of things have seemed far-fetched so far in these last 140-some days, so I guess I don't rule anything out.
Let's listen to Donald Trump's talking points that he recited today about why he thinks the Comey hearing went so well for the president. And I say talking points because don't expect sentences here.
No collusion, no obstruction. He's a leaker, but we want to get back to running our great country. We were very, very happy, and frankly, James Comey confirmed a lot of what I said, and some of the things that he said just weren't true.
Nick Ackerman, your reaction to that?
I don't even know where to start with that statement. I mean, first of all, no obstruction. He basically Comey came out and put in the first leg of the obstruction case, which is that meeting in the Oval Office. That is one of 4 legs of the obstruction case that we have that include the 2 national security people who say that Trump called them and asked them to help stop that investigation, as well as the firing of Mr. Comey. The fact is, we now have under oath the first part of that, and it's pretty well spelled out.
Let me ask you about one element of this, which people are stressing. The fact that the president asked everyone to leave the room, including the FBI director's boss, the Attorney General, leave the room. And Jim Comey testifies that people seemed reluctant to leave the room, that Jeff Sessions hung around hoping he was going to be able to stay in the room, and then that others tried to do that. But the president was insistent they all had to leave the room. How incriminating is that in the obstruction of justice investigation?
Extremely incriminating. It all goes to his corrupt intent, which is defined by law as his intent to stop the FBI investigation. It doesn't have to do with bribery. It doesn't have to do what we normally think of as corruption. It's the idea that he specifically intended to have that FBI investigation stopped in its tracks.
David Frum, I want to get your reaction to that, because you're someone who's worked in the White House and you know about the liturgy of these kinds of moments when it happens, when the room is cleared, or why that would be done. What was your reaction to that part of it?
Look, the reason you clear a room is because you're about to talk about something that is sensitive, and there are people who do not have the clearance or the need to know that particular thing. At those moments of drama, you can imagine many things, from domestic, international, where the president wants to talk to people with a very high level of security, and other people who are there are asked to leave. And there's no reluctance then. You understand this isn't for my ears. I don't think I've heard of any incidents in any presidency since the Nixon days where a president asked people to leave in order to do something like this. One other thing the president said, and in that same clip you played, where he accused Jim Comey of having said things that weren't true. Jim Comey was under oath. If they're not true, they're perjury. That's not the first time this president, as president, has accused important people of serious crimes. He's accused President Obama of crimes. He's accused National Security Advisor Rice of crimes. And I know we're all sort of hardened and habituated and the president says crazy things and you don't pay attention. But he's the head of state, and he's accusing important people of serious crimes. That must mean something.
We're going to have to break it there. Nick Ackerman, David Frum.